Good evening. In the spirit of Halloween approaching, I thought to myself, what do I associate the holiday with? It wasn't the trick-or-treating or the carved pumpkins that stuck out to me, but instead, for some strange reason, it was cemeteries. There's just something rather chilling about cemeteries at night, I think, and maybe it's just me that thinks of them when Halloween is mentioned. However, I hope you enjoy these 4 true cemetery scary stories. Number 1. A few years ago, a group of friends and I learned about an abandoned local cemetery. We go during the day to check it out. There are about 30 or so gravestones, ranging from 80-year-olds all the way down to a 5-year-old girl. The newest grave is at least 70 years old. Living in a young town, I realise many suburbs bear the names of these same gravestones. We decide to return later on at night and play hide and seek. When we arrive after dark, my perception of the area totally changes. What was scenic and sort of sad earlier now feels scary. All the graves are partially hidden by long grass, and large dead trees surround the area. We pick someone to be it and proceed to hide. I don't hide particularly well, but I remain unfound for some time. So I lie near a fence in the long grass, playing on my phone. After about 10 minutes, I hear some grass move around me. This is Australia, so there's a chance it is. Who am I kidding? It definitely is. Something that could kill me. So I move into a more defendable position, yet stay hidden. This new position puts my back to a gravestone, on the other side from where the body lays. Another few minutes pass, as the wind picks up and the temperature drops by a few degrees. I swear to God I feel someone touch my shoulder. The voice of a 5-year-old girl whispers right next to my ear, "You're it." Needless to say, I freaking scream like a girl, which also freaks my friends out. After a brief explanation of what happened, we quickly relocate to the entrance of the area to make sure everyone got out. Detail: the gate is downhill of the graves, so looking up they are silhouetted. When we confirm everyone is there, one of the other guys grabs my arm and points up to the hill. And I kid you not, we see the outline of a little girl in 20s style kids clothing skipping around the headstones. Fastest I've ever run in my life. Number 2. My family and my mum's friends love to ghost hunt. Back in August, we decided to go in a cemetery that is close to our home. The cemetery was like any other cemetery when you walk in, but after dark it's a little different. The first night my family went, I decided not to go, but when they got back they had some stories to tell. My mother, aunt and cousin were walking into the cemetery when they all 3 experienced something unusual and strange. My mum felt like a piece of her hair was being ripped out of her scalp. My aunt and cousin felt someone touch their hands. Later that night, when they came home and told me, I have to admit I was intrigued. That's when another cousin of mine, Aidan, said something that shocked us all. He told us exactly what happened to my mum when he was nowhere around. You see, Aidan was sleeping in the car, so he had no way of knowing what had happened. A few weeks after that, I decided to go with them. My sister, aunt, mum, and I were walking down the cemetery. We were careful around the gravestones, and we walked over to a dirt road that you can drive around the cemetery on. We were standing there and I started to shake. My teeth were chattering and I had goosebumps. We started to walk along the road and we stopped and turned around. I saw a black shadow move behind a tree. but I kept my mouth shut. A few seconds later, my aunt said, "Did you see that?" I asked what. She replied with, "I just saw something move behind that tree." By then, we were a little creeped out, but I hadn't harmed us, so we weren't really scared. After that night, I've always wondered what my aunt and I saw. I just find it a little strange we saw the same thing at the same time. Number 3. When I was in high school, I grew up in Napa Valley. Back in the early 90s, a group of friends and I went up to the local cemetery to try and scare a couple of girls we had brought along, so they would cuddle up a little closer. As we walked toward the entrance of the cemetery to leave, we were approaching an area that had a street light over it. We were split up into 2 groups, about 5 in each group. The group who was walking in front just kept walking, and the group I was in, that included my best friend Kevin, one other guy and a girl. We all stopped dead in our tracks as suddenly about 50 feet in front of us appeared a man standing under the streetlight wearing a white robe. He seemed to be glowing and had white hair. The robe he was wearing was tied at his waist and opened slightly at his chest, so you could see his skin. He was also barefoot. He had a young face. He stared at us with an earnest but kind face. He then looked up the hill into the cemetery and pointed with his right hand at something. We all stood there frozen with shock. The group ahead of us all kept walking and saw nothing. But we turned around and all ran up the hill. Being an older cemetery, it had some mausoleums up the hill. We hid behind them and said we all saw the same thing. One of the younger boys started to cry and the young girl squeezed my hand to the point that it would break. We ran back down the hill and got out of the cemetery and met the others at the car. They asked why we had ran away and thought that we were trying to scare them when we told them the story. They said that they had sat right under the light where we had seen the man and had not seen a thing. Years later, I would make the others describe what they had seen to me, and it matches to the letter of what I saw. We never went back to the cemetery at night. We did later go back to the cemetery in daylight though. It seemed the area that he was pointing into was a group of prominent family plots, one of them being the grave of the former governor of Missouri, Lilburn, W. Boggs. We later learned that Boggs had declared an extermination order of all the Mormons that had settled in his state. Joseph Smith, the Mormon prophet, had prophesied that he would be buried in the shadow of one of the Mormon chapels. It just so happens there is a Mormon chapel right across the street from the cemetery. Number 4. I'll be the first to admit that I've always been fascinated with the death and the darker side of life. When I was a teenager and very much a goth girl, I didn't think twice when I was invited to visit a graveyard. My boyfriend enjoyed telling creepy stories and he set the tone as we made our way well after midnight. Seeing as it was just the 2 of us, I was a little apprehensive, but the adrenaline was pumping. Once we climbed over the low fence, we ran amok, laughing and trying to freak each other out. After about 45 minutes, we started to check out several tombstones, reading what was written. I was particularly taken by one which was very old and nearly completely covered by ivy. As I pushed the leaves aside, my boyfriend whispered, "Can you hear something?" I asked, "What?" I stood up and strained my ears. At first I didn't hear anything. Then a strange groan came out of thin air. Before I could even scream, my boyfriend took off. I was shocked that he had left me to my own devices. Rooted to the spot, I was suddenly alone. That was until I saw an eerie apparition peek out from behind a tree. I'll never forget the terrifying hollow eyes. I fell backwards as I finally screamed, not realizing that I'd landed on a grassy grave. Scrambling to get up, I yelled my boyfriend's name and noticed the wind picking up and swirling around me. As I took off, running here and there while screaming for my boyfriend, I felt like someone was right behind me. I turned to look, but no one was there. Now I was crying and freaking out more than I ever had before that night. The groaning started up again, propelling me into more of a crazy zigzagging through the cemetery. I felt like I was trapped in a terrifying maze, being chased by strange winds and disembodied voices. My boyfriend was nowhere to be found, and I was horrified that I couldn't find the fence, no matter where I ran. It was almost impossible for me to calm down enough to stop and try to get my bearings. At one stage, I heard laughter followed by whispering and bizarre chattering. I was absolutely petrified. I began to cry as I stumbled around, confused and afraid that I would never find my way out. I was furious at my boyfriend and already knew that I would break up with him for leaving me alone and vulnerable. Then my flesh froze as a chilling voice whispered into my ear, "Stay right there." I spun around and saw what appeared to be the mist in the shape of a woman, from the waist up. Her face was twisted in a snarl, and I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted as I screamed blue murder. I felt like I was running for hours, sobbing now and my legs so heavy and shaking. I finally saw the fence. In a single leap, I made it over the fence, then twisted around as a final blast of frozen wind hit my face. I knew I was finally free from the cemetery. Well, that's all for our Halloween cemetery stories. As always, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you all in the next one.